I'm Jessica Miller, 34 years old, and for 8 years I thought I had the perfect marriage to Michael. Then one day, he told me my weight made me unlovable before walking out the door with his skinny mistress. What he never expected was that his cruel rejection would light a fire in me that changed everything. Before I dive into how my husband's cruel rejection became the catalyst for my most powerful transformation, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had to rebuild yourself after someone tried to break you. Trust me, this story of sweet justice is worth staying for. I grew up in Brighton, a small town in Michigan where everybody knew everybody. From childhood, I struggled with my weight. Kids can be cruel, and I heard all the names: chubby, fatty, whale. By high school, I'd learned to use humor as armor, becoming the funny friend who laughed along with the jokes before anyone could make me the punchline. College was my escape. I packed my bags for the University of Michigan, determined to reinvent myself. The freshman 15 hit me hard, but so did something else: meeting Michael in my sophomore year literature class. He was tall, athletic, with dark hair and eyes that crinkled when he smiled. The first time we talked, I was preparing a presentation on Jane Austen, nervously shuffling my note cards when he sat beside me. "I never understood why everyone's so obsessed with Mr. Darcy," he said, flashing a smile that made my heart flutter. "He's basically just a rich guy with an attitude problem." I laughed, surprised by his candor. "That's exactly why everyone loves him. The attitude is just packaging for the vulnerability underneath." Our conversation flowed effortlessly after that. We debated books, shared dreams, and I found myself forgetting my usual self-consciousness about my size 16 frame. Michael seemed to see beyond my physical appearance, focusing instead on my mind, my humor, my heart. When he asked me out a week later, I almost looked behind me to check if he was talking to someone else. Our first date was at a campus coffee shop where we talked until closing time. The barista had to politely kick us out, and even then, we continued our conversation walking around the moonlit campus for hours. When Michael kissed me goodnight outside my dorm, I felt beautiful for the first time in my life. Our relationship moved quickly. Within 6 months, we were inseparable. Michael introduced me to his friends, his family. His mother, a slender woman with perfect makeup and a critical eye, looked me up and down during our first meeting, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Michael always did have unconventional taste," she said, patting my hand. I swallowed the hurt, focusing instead on how Michael defended me, telling her I was the most intelligent woman he'd ever met. After graduation, Michael proposed during a weekend trip to Lake Michigan. We stood on the beach at sunset, and he dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring that caught the dying light. "Jessica," he said, "you've made me happier than I ever thought possible. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down my face as I said yes. The wedding was a whirlwind of tulle and flowers and family tensions. I spent weeks stressing over finding a dress that would flatter my figure, finally settling on an A-line style that minimized my waist. On our wedding day, Michael whispered that I was the most beautiful bride he'd ever seen, and I believed him. We settled in a small starter home in the Chicago suburbs. I secured a position teaching 4th grade at a local elementary school, while Michael began climbing the corporate ladder at a prestigious marketing firm downtown. Our first years of marriage were sweet domesticity, weekend brunches, movie nights, planning for our future. We talked about children, agreeing to wait until Michael's career was more established and we could afford a larger home. The pounds crept on gradually. The comfort of security, the stress of teaching, winter evenings curled up with takeout, my weight increased steadily. I noticed my clothes growing tighter, my cheeks fuller in photos, but Michael never mentioned it. I thought that meant it didn't matter to him. The first time he made a comment about my weight, it seemed innocent enough. We were getting ready for bed, and I was struggling to zip up a dress for the next day. "Maybe you should try that new gym near your school," Michael suggested. "We could go together on weekends." Are you saying I need to lose weight? I asked, trying to keep my voice light. I'm just thinking about your health, Jess, he replied, kissing my forehead. I want you around for a long time. I nodded, telling myself he was being caring, not critical. We did go to the gym that weekend, but Michael's interest in our joint fitness journey lasted exactly 2 sessions before work commitments took precedence. I continued alone for a few weeks before the familiar cycle of self-consciousness and discomfort in the mirror-lined space drove me away. As Michael's career accelerated, so did the subtle shifts in our relationship. He began attending more client dinners and networking events, often coming home smelling of expensive cologne and alcohol. I told myself this was normal, the price of success. Sometimes he'd bring me along to company functions, his hand resting in the small of my back as he introduced me to colleagues whose eyes would widen slightly at the contrast between slim, polished Michael and his plus-size wife. Jessica teaches elementary school, he'd say, as if my career choice needed justification. I'd smile and nod, feeling increasingly out of place among the sleek, ambitious professionals in Michael's world. During our 5th anniversary dinner at an upscale restaurant downtown, Michael raised his glass. To us, he said, and to the future. His smile seemed genuine, but something in his eyes had changed, a distance I couldn't quite bridge. That night, I tried to initiate intimacy, only to have Michael claim exhaustion from work. As I lay awake beside his sleeping form, I wondered when we had started drifting apart, and how I hadn't noticed until now. I reached over to touch his shoulder, remembering the boy from literature class who had seen beyond my size to the person inside. He was still there, I told myself. We just needed to find our way back to each other. The first undeniable sign that something was wrong came on a crisp fall morning during our 5th year of marriage. I reached for Michael in bed, only to find his side empty and cold. Following the sound of his voice, I discovered him in our home office, door slightly ajar, speaking quietly into his phone. I know. I'll figure something out, he was saying, his voice low and intimate. She doesn't suspect anything. My heart hammered against my ribs as I backed away silently. Who was he talking to? What didn't I suspect? I spent the day in a fog, analyzing his words from every angle, trying to convince myself there was an innocent explanation. That evening, I casually asked about his early morning call. Michael didn't miss a beat. Just work stuff. Thompson's writing me about the Meritech account. His explanation was smooth, reasonable. I almost believed him until I noticed he couldn't quite meet my eyes. Over the next few weeks, I noticed a parade of changes in Michael. He joined an exclusive gym downtown, one with personal trainers and protein shake bars. His wardrobe underwent a subtle transformation: designer shirts, tailored slacks, a sleek new watch I didn't recognize. When I complimented it, he mumbled something about a bonus at work. The criticisms began small but grew more frequent. Do you really need a second helping? He'd ask as I reached for the pasta bowl. That color does nothing for your complexion, he'd comment about a blouse I'd worn for years. Each remark like a paper cut, minor on its own, but stinging and cumulative. I tried fighting back with positivity. I bought cookbooks featuring healthy recipes, preparing elaborate meals of grilled chicken and quinoa. I suggested evening walks around our neighborhood to reconnect after long workdays. Michael would agree half-heartedly, then cancel at the last minute due to work calls or sudden exhaustion. During a parent-teacher conference night at school, I found myself sharing these concerns with Rachel, the art teacher who had become my closest work friend. We sat in my classroom after the parents had left, sharing a box of cookies I'd brought. He's just so distant lately, I confessed, twisting my wedding ring. And he keeps making these comments about my weight. Rachel's normally cheerful face darkened. Has he always been critical about your appearance? Not really. I mean, he's mentioned health concerns, but lately it feels different. I sighed, reaching for another cookie before hesitating and drawing back my hand. I'm probably being oversensitive. Or maybe he's being a jerk, Rachel countered. You're beautiful, Jess. And even if you wanted to lose weight, it should be your choice, not because he's making you feel inadequate. I defended Michael, listing his stresses at work, the pressure from his perfectionist parents, our financial goals for a bigger house. Even as the words left my mouth, they sounded hollow, like excuses I'd rehearsed to convince myself as much as Rachel. The first time I met Amanda was at Michael's company holiday party. The marketing firm had rented out an upscale hotel ballroom downtown, and I'd spent weeks finding a dress that would look festive and flattering. I settled on a black velvet number with a sweetheart neckline that emphasized my bust while hiding my stomach. Michael barely looked at me as we entered, immediately scanning the room for colleagues. There's Keith from accounts, he said, guiding me across the room. And that's Amanda, she just transferred from the New York office. She's been instrumental on the LuxDex campaign. Amanda was everything I wasn't. Tall, slim, with sleek blonde hair and a confidence that radiated from her perfectly postured body. Her red dress clung to every curve she did have and highlighted the absence of those she didn't. She air-kissed Michael's cheeks with familiar ease before turning to me with a practiced smile. So you're the teacher, she said, her tone making my profession sound quaint, like I'd said I handcrafted dollhouse furniture. Michael mentions you sometimes. Throughout the evening, I watched as Michael gravitated toward Amanda repeatedly, their heads bent close in conversation, laughing at private jokes. When the dancing started, Michael claimed fatigue, but 30 minutes later was on the floor with Amanda, his hand resting perhaps a bit too low on her back. On the silent car ride home, I finally asked, "Is there something going on between you and Amanda?" Michael's laugh was sharp, dismissive. "Don't be ridiculous, Jess. She's a colleague, a valuable team member. You seemed very comfortable with each other." "This is why I hate bringing you to these things," he snapped. "You get insecure and embarrass me with unfounded jealousy." I turned to look out the window, blinking back tears. Was I being paranoid? The Jessica who met Michael in college would have trusted him implicitly. But that Jessica hadn't watched her husband's eyes follow another woman across a room with naked longing. The breaking point came during a dinner party at our home. Michael had invited several coworkers, including Amanda, without consulting me first. I spent the entire day cleaning and preparing food, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in my stomach. As guests mingled in our living room, I overheard Michael in the kitchen with Keith and Amanda. "Jessica's actually an amazing cook," he was saying. "It's a miracle she doesn't weigh 300 pounds. Laughter erupted as I stood frozen in the hallway, a tray of appetizers in my trembling hands. Amanda's voice floated out next. "Well, self-control isn't for everyone." I plastered on a smile and entered the kitchen as if I'd heard nothing, setting down the tray and excusing myself to check on something in the oven. I caught Michael's eye as I turned away. The flash of guilt on his face confirmed he knew I'd overheard. Later that night, after the guests had left and I was silently loading the dishwasher, Michael approached from behind, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Everyone loved the food," he said, as if that made up for everything. I shrugged off his embrace. "Including Amanda? She seems to think I lack self-control." Michael sighed heavily. "It was just a joke, Jess. You're being oversensitive." "Am I? Or am I just finally seeing clearly?" I turned to face him. "There's something going on with you too, isn't there?" "There's nothing going on," he insisted, but his eyes shifted away. "Amanda's just easy to talk to. She understands the pressures of our industry. And I don't. That's not what I meant. Look, maybe if you made more of an effort to fit in with my colleagues, you wouldn't feel so threatened." "Make more of an effort?" I repeated incredulously. "I spent all day cooking and cleaning for your friends who mock me behind my back. That's not fair." His voice hardened. "If you're so worried about what people think, maybe consider that I'm the one who has to explain why my wife doesn't care enough about herself to stay in shape." The words hit like a physical blow. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face, and felt something inside me crack. Without another word, I walked past him to our bedroom and locked the door, spending the night curled around my pillow, wondering when exactly love had curdled into contempt. The discovery happened on a Tuesday morning. Michael had left for work, forgetting his phone on the nightstand. It buzzed with an incoming message, the preview visible on the screen. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again." Hey! My hand shook as I picked up the phone. I'd never snooped through Michael's personal messages before. We'd always respected each other's privacy. But the evidence of his betrayal was literally flashing before my eyes. I entered his passcode, my birthday, ironically, and opened the message thread with Amanda. What I found shattered any remaining illusions about my marriage. Months of exchanges, intimate, explicit, loving. Plans made while I was teaching late. Hotel room confirmations. Complaints about having to go home to me. And most devastating of all, Michael's words about me. She doesn't have a clue. Too busy drowning her feelings in ice cream to notice what's right in front of her. I sat on our bed, still unmade from the morning, and read every message, each one a nail in the coffin of our relationship. When I couldn't cry anymore, I carefully replaced the phone exactly where he'd left it and called in sick to work. That evening, I confronted him the moment he walked through the door. "How long have you been sleeping with Amanda?" Michael froze, briefcase still in hand. For a second, panic flashed across his face before settling into careful neutrality. "What are you talking about?" "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I saw your messages. All of them." He set down his briefcase slowly. "You went through my phone? That's a violation of my privacy. And sleeping with your coworker isn't a violation of our marriage vows?" Michael's shoulders slumped slightly, but his expression hardened. "It's not what you think." "Really? Because I think you're having an affair with Amanda while making me feel worthless about my weight." My voice cracked despite my determination to stay composed. "It's not an affair," he insisted, moving past me into the kitchen. "Amanda and I have a connection, yes. A professional relationship that's evolved." Evolved into hotel rooms and lies? Michael slammed his hand on the counter. "What did you expect, Jessica? Look at yourself." He gestured wildly at my body. "You've completely let yourself go. Do you have any idea how that makes me feel? How embarrassing it is." "Embarrassing?" I repeated, stunned by his cruelty. "Yes, embarrassing. I'm at the peak of my career, surrounded by successful, attractive people who take pride in their appearance. And then there's you, who apparently doesn't care enough about our marriage to make an effort. So this is my fault? Your cheating is because I gained weight." "It's a symptom of a bigger problem," he said, his voice cold. "You've given up on yourself, and by extension, on us. Amanda takes care of herself. She's ambitious, energetic. When's the last time you suggested anything besides takeout and Netflix?" Each word cut deeper than the last. I'd spent years believing Michael loved me for who I was, not what size jeans I wore. Now he was rewriting our entire history through the lens of my body size. "I've tried," I whispered. "The diets, the gym memberships you insisted on but never used with me. Nothing was ever good enough." "Trying isn't succeeding," he said dismissively. "Look, I didn't want it to come to this, but maybe this is the wake-up call you need. Either make real changes or accept that we want different things from life." The ultimatum hung in the air between us. In that moment, I realized how far gone our marriage truly was. This wasn't about weight. It was about respect, honesty, commitment. Things Michael had already discarded. "I want you to leave," I said quietly. "Don't be dramatic, Jess." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear. I want you out of this house tonight." Michael laughed incredulously. "You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know. Amanda's place, maybe? I'm sure she'd be thrilled to have you full-time instead of just for hotel rendezvous." The argument escalated, voices raised, tears flowing. Michael eventually stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I collapsed on the couch, my body heaving with sobs that seemed to come from the deepest part of me. The following weeks blurred together in a haze of grief and comfort eating. Michael returned home after 2 days, acting as if nothing had happened. We existed in painful parallel, sharing space, but not connection. I threw myself into work, staying late at school to avoid coming home. When we did interact, his criticisms grew more pointed, more cruel. "Those pants are really straining at the seams, Jess. Maybe skip the pasta tonight? No wonder I can't keep my hands off you. There's so much of you to love." This last one delivered with a smirk that made it clear it wasn't a compliment. I spiraled deeper into depression. Food became both comfort and punishment. I'd binge on ice cream, then hate myself for proving Michael right. I stopped seeing friends, avoided family calls, pulled away from colleagues except for Rachel, who watched my decline with growing concern. My initial attempt at weight loss came from desperation rather than self-love. I ordered meal replacement shakes, downloaded fitness apps, and started walking around the neighborhood at dawn when no one would see me struggling to breathe after a single block. Michael noticed, but offered no encouragement. Instead, he'd say things like, "Those shakes won't work if you're still sneaking snacks," when he had no evidence I was doing any such thing. One evening, I overheard him on the phone in his office, door ajar. "Yeah, she's trying some diet now. Too little, too late, if you ask me." "No, it's pathetic actually." I know, but it's complicated with the house and finances." I didn't need to hear more to know he was discussing me, discussing our marriage as a burden he was strategizing to escape from. Something broke inside me that night, not just my heart, but my sense of who I was, who we had been together. The Jessica who had fallen in love with Michael in that literature class seemed like a stranger now, a naive girl I could barely remember. My teaching suffered as my personal life imploded. I found myself snapping at students, forgetting lesson plans, staring blankly during staff meetings. The principal called me in for a concerned chat about my performance, and I barely held it together, mumbling excuses about seasonal allergies affecting my sleep. When I got home that day, I found Michael packing a suitcase. "Business trip," he said curtly. 3 days in New York. I nodded, too exhausted to question the lie. We both knew Amanda had transferred from the New York office. The connection wasn't hard to make. After he left, I sat in our empty bedroom, surrounded by the artifacts of a life built on what I now realized was a foundation of sand. Wedding photos where we beamed with hope. Souvenirs from vacations where we'd still held hands. Books we'd once read aloud to each other on lazy Sunday mornings. I opened my closet, pushing past clothes that no longer fit, searching for something that might make me feel like myself again. At the back, I found a box of college mementos, including the first Valentine's card Michael had given me. To Jessica, it read, "Whose beauty, inside and out, takes my breath away every day." I sank to the floor, card clutched to my chest, and finally allowed myself to face the truth. Michael had never loved me unconditionally, and no amount of weight loss would fix what was already broken beyond repair. The teacher conference in Indianapolis was supposed to last 3 days. I'd been selected to present a workshop on integrative learning techniques, an honor that would normally have thrilled me. Instead, I viewed it as 3 blessed days away from the emotional battlefield our home had become. On the second day, however, crippling migraines forced me to withdraw from my remaining sessions. The conference organizer arranged for an early train home, assuring me another teacher would cover my presentation. I texted Michael that I was returning early but received no response. Assuming he was in meetings, I caught a cab from the station, looking forward to taking pain medication and sleeping in my own bed. Our house was eerily quiet when I entered, but a faint sound from upstairs caught my attention, music playing softly from our bedroom. Confused, I set down my bags and climbed the stairs, my head throbbing with each step. The bedroom door was partially open, golden afternoon light spilling onto the hallway carpet. I heard a laugh, a woman's laugh, followed by Michael's low murmur. My body went cold, then hot, as if my blood couldn't decide whether to freeze or boil. I pushed the door open. There they were, in our bed, our marriage bed, Michael and Amanda, tangled in sheets I had washed just before leaving town. They didn't notice me immediately, too absorbed in each other. I stood paralyzed, watching my husband kiss another woman's neck, her blonde hair spread across my pillow. It was Amanda who saw me first. Her eyes widened, and she gasped, pushing against Michael's chest. He turned, his expression morphing from confusion to shock to something like irritation at being interrupted. "Jessica," he said, as if I were an unexpected delivery person rather than his wife finding him in flagrante delicto. "You're supposed to be in Indianapolis." Clearly, I managed to say, my voice barely audible. Amanda scrambled to cover herself with the sheet, but Michael just sat there, making no move to hide his betrayal or even appear ashamed. The casualness of it hit me harder than the act itself. This wasn't a first-time indiscretion born of weakness. This was routine. This was comfortable. "You should wait downstairs," Michael said, his tone almost bored. "We need to get dressed." Something snapped inside me. "No," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "You don't get to tell me what to do in my own home. You get dressed and get out. Both of you." Amanda grabbed her clothes and retreated to the bathroom. Michael pulled on his boxers and stood, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Let's not be dramatic about this, Jess." "Dramatic?" I laughed, a harsh sound that hurt my throat. "Finding my husband having sex with another woman in our bed isn't drama, Michael. It's my life. It's our marriage." "Marriage," he scoffed. "Is that what you call this? We haven't had a real marriage in years. Because you've been cheating. Because you stopped trying," he shouted, finally showing emotion. "Look at yourself, Jessica. Just look." He gestured at me with disgust. "I can't be attracted to someone who doesn't care about herself." His words landed like physical blows. I swayed slightly, gripping the doorframe for support. "So my body is an excuse for betraying our vows?" "This isn't about your body," he said, though his eyes traveled down me in contradiction. "It's about what your body represents, your lack of effort, your complacency, your willingness to just settle." Amanda emerged from the bathroom fully dressed, her face a mask of embarrassment and defiance. She slipped past me without eye contact, hurrying down the stairs. The front door opened and closed a moment later. Michael and I stood facing each other across the bedroom that had once been our sanctuary. He looked like a stranger now, his handsome face distorted by contempt. "I'll get a hotel tonight," he said finally. "We can talk tomorrow when you've calmed down." "There's nothing to talk about," I replied. "It's over. Don't make permanent decisions in temporary emotion, Jess. This isn't temporary. This was your choice, made repeatedly, every time you lied to me, criticized me, cheated on me." My voice cracked, but I pressed on. "I deserve better than this. Better than you." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, at my backbone. Then it was gone, replaced by cool detachment. "Fine. I'll have my lawyer contact you." He packed an overnight bag efficiently, like a man who had rehearsed this moment. At the bedroom door, he paused. "For what it's worth, I did love you once." "Get out," I whispered. After he left, I stripped the bed with shaking hands, stuffing sheets and pillowcases into a garbage bag. I couldn't bear the thought of sleeping surrounded by the evidence of his betrayal. In the bathroom, I found Amanda's lipstick on a hand towel, a smear of coral pink that seemed to mock me. I threw the towel in the bag too. Exhausted beyond tears, I collapsed on the bare mattress, staring at the ceiling as darkness fell. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Michael, which I ignored. Around midnight, Rachel called, and I answered automatically. "Jess." Her voice was concerned. "You okay? You never texted me about how your presentation went." The simple kindness of her question broke the dam. Words poured out of me. The early return, the discovery, Michael's cruel assessment of my worth. Rachel listened without interruption, making only small sounds of sympathy and outrage. "I'm coming over," she declared when I finally fell silent. "It's midnight. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning. You shouldn't be alone right now." True to her word, Rachel arrived 30 minutes later with ice cream, wine, and an air mattress. She helped me remake the bed with fresh sheets, opened windows to clear out the stench of betrayal, and sat with me until dawn broke, letting me cycle through shock, grief, and rage. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later by courier, along with a handwritten note from Michael. "I'm sorry it came to this. Maybe if you hadn't let yourself go, things could have been different." The callousness of it, blaming me even in what should have been a moment of remorse, was the final cut. I took sick leave from school, unable to face cheerful children or concerned colleagues. Rachel moved in temporarily, bringing groceries, forcing me to eat when all I wanted was to disappear into sleep. One morning, about a week after Michael left, I found myself staring at an old photo album. College-era Jessica smiled back at me, younger, lighter, but most noticeably, happier. Her eyes held none of the shame and defeat I now saw in the mirror daily. She deserved better, I whispered to the smiling girl in the photographs. And so do I. That moment, holding physical evidence of who I had been before Michael's emotional abuse eroded my self-worth, became my turning point. Not because I wanted to become that size again, but because I wanted to reclaim the confidence and joy that girl had possessed. Not for Michael, not for revenge, but for me. The first step toward reclaiming my life came in the form of Dr. Wilson, a therapist Rachel had recommended. She was a warm, no-nonsense woman in her 50s who listened to my story without judgment during our initial consultation. "What I'm hearing," she said when I'd finished recounting the collapse of my marriage, "isn't just a story about weight or infidelity. It's about emotional abuse." I flinched at the term. Abuse seems extreme. Michael never hit me. Emotional abuse can be more insidious than physical violence, Dr. Wilson explained gently. The constant criticism, making you feel worthless because of your appearance, blaming you for his infidelity, these are classic patterns of emotional abuse. Tears streamed down my face as years of accumulated pain found a name. We developed a treatment plan focusing on depression and rebuilding my self-esteem. Weekly therapy sessions became my anchor as I navigated the choppy waters of separation and pending divorce. The school principal granted me extended leave, and my fourth graders sent a handmade card signed by every student, their innocent well wishes for Mrs. Miller to feel better soon, bringing both tears and the first genuine smile I'd managed in weeks. During this time, divorce proceedings began. Michael hired an aggressive attorney who tried to frame me as mentally unstable based on my leave of absence. My own lawyer, a stern woman named Patricia, advised documenting everything: Michael's verbal abuse, evidence of his affair, financial records showing his recent unusual spending patterns. He abandoned the marriage through infidelity, Patricia stated matter-of-factly. Don't let him control the narrative. On Dr. Wilson's recommendation, I joined a support group for women going through divorce. The group met Tuesday evenings in a community center downtown. Walking into that first meeting, I nearly turned around and fled, intimidated by the idea of sharing my humiliation with strangers. But something made me stay, perhaps desperation, perhaps the tiny spark of determination that had begun to flicker inside me. Linda, Marianne, Susan, Denise, women of different ages, backgrounds, and circumstances, all navigating the wreckage of broken marriages. Their stories varied, but the underlying themes remained consistent: betrayal, loss, rebuilding. They welcomed me without judgment, creating a space where I could speak my truth without shame. "The way he treated you says everything about him and nothing about you," Susan told me one evening. At 62, she was ending a 40-year marriage after discovering her husband's long-term affair. Took me 4 decades to learn that lesson. You're getting it earlier. It was through the support group that I met Kimberly, a personal trainer who specialized in working with women recovering from trauma. A domestic violence survivor herself, she understood the complex relationship between emotional abuse and physical self-care. "Your body isn't the enemy," she explained during our first consultation. "It's carried you through one of the most difficult experiences a person can face. Now it's time to make peace with it." Kimberly's approach wasn't about rapid weight loss or punishing exercise regimens. Instead, she focused on rebuilding my relationship with movement and nutrition. We started with simple walking sessions in the park, talking about everything except calories and pounds. "Notice how your body feels," she would encourage. "The strength in your legs, the rhythm of your breathing, the way the sunshine feels on your skin." Gradually, these walks became jogs. Then came strength training, yoga, dancing to music in her studio when no one else was around. My body began to respond, not just changing in appearance, but in function. I slept better, had more energy, experienced fewer headaches. Parallel to the physical work with Kimberly, I educated myself about nutrition. Not dieting. I'd tried enough crash diets under Michael's critical eye to know they didn't work long-term. Instead, I learned about nourishment, about foods that fueled my body versus those that left me feeling sluggish or bloated. I discovered the joy of cooking for myself, preparing meals that were both delicious and nutritious. The first small victories came slowly. Walking a mile without stopping to catch my breath. Cooking a healthy meal from scratch and genuinely enjoying it. Looking in the mirror and focusing on my eyes rather than my stomach. Throwing away the scale that had ruled my self-worth for too long. At Dr. Wilson's suggestion, I started keeping a journal, documenting not just the physical changes, but the emotional ones. Some entries were raw with pain. Found one of Michael's old shirts in the laundry today. Smelled it before I could stop myself. Cried for an hour. How long before these ambushes stop? Others marked progress. Ran 2 miles with Kimberly today. 2 miles. She didn't tell me the distance until after. Said she knew I could do it even if I didn't. Started crying right there on the track. Different tears this time though. Through therapy, I began connecting my weight issues to childhood experiences. A critical father, a mother who equated thinness with worthiness, early experiences of being bullied. Understanding these roots didn't immediately heal the wounds, but it helped explain why Michael's behavior had found such fertile ground in my psyche. 6 months after Michael moved out, I returned to teaching. My students noticed the change immediately, not just my gradually shrinking physical presence, but my energy, my smile, my patience. The fog of depression had lifted enough for me to rediscover my passion for education. "Mrs. Miller, you look happy," observed Zoe, a perceptive 9-year-old, during my first week back. "I'm getting there," I replied honestly. My colleagues were supportive but curious. Rumors about my marriage's end had circulated during my absence. Rachel ran interference, shutting down gossip and protecting my privacy. The principal welcomed me back warmly, expressing admiration for my resilience. Throughout this period, Michael remained peripherally present through legal communications and occasional text messages that ranged from manipulative, "I miss what we had," to cruel, "Heard you're back at school. Don't overdo it. Stress eating won't help your case." I shared these with Patricia, who documented them as evidence of ongoing emotional harassment, and with Dr. Wilson, who helped me process my reactions without letting them derail my progress. The first holiday season alone was both challenging and liberating. Thanksgiving with my parents involved careful navigation of their questions about the divorce. Christmas brought an invitation to Rachel's family gathering, where I experienced the novel sensation of celebrating without walking on eggshells around Michael's moods. On New Year's Eve, I stood before my bathroom mirror, really seeing myself for the first time in months. My body had changed, clothes looser, face more defined, but the most significant transformation was in my eyes. The defeated, shame-filled gaze had been replaced by something clearer, steadier. Not confidence exactly, not yet, but its precursor, self-recognition. Hello, I whispered to my reflection. I'm still here. 1 year after discovering Michael and Amanda in our bed, I stood in front of my closet faced with an unexpected problem. Nothing fit anymore. After months of consistent healthy eating and exercise, I'd lost significant weight. My clothes hung loosely, making even once favorite outfits look sloppy and unflattering. Rachel declared it a fashion emergency. "This calls for a shopping intervention," she announced, dragging me to the mall on a Saturday morning. New body, new wardrobe, new chapter. I resisted at first, nervous about shopping after years of avoiding fitting rooms and their unforgiving mirrors. But Rachel was persistent, pulling styles I would never have considered: fitted dresses, tailored blazers, jeans that actually showcased rather than concealed. "Try this," she said, handing me a vibrant blue wrap dress. "It matches your eyes." In the fitting room, I slipped it on, prepared for disappointment. Instead, I froze, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back at me wasn't just thinner, she was standing taller, shoulders back, chin lifted. The dress highlighted curves I'd forgotten I had, and yes, brought out the blue in my eyes that had once been my favorite feature before I stopped seeing anything but flaws. "Well?" Rachel called from outside. I opened the door wordlessly, tears welling. "Oh, honey," she said softly. "You look beautiful." That shopping trip became a turning point, not because of the physical transformation, but because it helped me see myself through new eyes. We left with bags full of clothes that celebrated rather than concealed my body. That evening, I made another change, visiting a salon where the stylist replaced my long, often hidden hair with a modern bob that framed my face and required me to look the world in the eye. At school, the changes didn't go unnoticed. Students commented innocently on my pretty new hair and colorful clothes. Colleagues were more measured, but equally positive. The most significant reaction came from Principal Barrett, who called me into her office one afternoon. "Jessica, I've been impressed with your teaching since your return," she said, getting straight to the point as usual. "The 4th grade team leader position is opening next fall. I'd like you to consider applying." I blinked in surprise. Team leader was a respected position with additional responsibilities and compensation. Before my separation from Michael, I would have immediately declined, certain I couldn't handle the pressure. Now I found myself nodding. "I'd like that very much," I replied, surprising myself with my confidence. As my professional life expanded, so did my social circle. Through Kimberly's fitness studio, I joined a hiking club that met weekends to explore local trails. Through a community education center, I discovered a love for cooking classes where I learned to prepare international cuisines that Michael would have dismissed as too exotic. I reconnected with college friends Michael had subtly isolated me from over the years. Jen, my freshman roommate, visited from Boston, marveling at the changes in my life. "You're you again," she observed over coffee. "The real you." The divorce proceedings continued, complicated by Michael's attempts to minimize the financial settlement. Patricia fought fiercely on my behalf, gathering evidence of his affair, his hidden expenditures on Amanda, his pattern of emotional abuse. I testified in depositions, my voice steady as I recounted his cruelty, no longer protecting him from the consequences of his actions. It was during this time that I uncovered the full extent of Michael's betrayal. Financial discovery revealed credit card statements showing hotel charges dating back years, not just with Amanda, but in cities where other female colleagues conveniently had meetings. Amanda had been just the latest, not the first or only. The revelation stung, but less than I expected. Each new discovery felt less like a personal wound and more like confirmation that I'd made the right decision in ending the marriage. Then came the encounter I'd both dreaded and secretly anticipated. Dining with Rachel at a new restaurant downtown, I spotted them the moment we entered, Michael and Amanda at a corner table, his hand covering hers on the tablecloth. Rachel saw them too, immediately suggesting we leave, but something in me refused to retreat. "No," I said firmly. "This is a restaurant I wanted to try. I'm not leaving because he's here." We were seated across the room, but within clear sight lines. I felt Michael's gaze before I saw it, that prickling sensation of being watched. Looking up from my menu, I met his eyes directly for the first time in months. The shock on his face was almost comical, jaw literally dropping as he took in my transformed appearance. Amanda noticed his distraction and turned, her own eyes widening slightly before she deliberately returned to her meal. Rachel squeezed my hand under the table. "You okay?" I nodded, surprised to find it was true. Seeing Michael produced none of the heart-pounding anxiety I'd anticipated. Instead, I felt strangely calm, even as he excused himself from his table and approached ours. "Jessica," he said, standing awkwardly beside our table. "You look different." "Hello, Michael," I replied, my voice steady. Yes, a lot has changed. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Up close, I noticed details I hadn't expected. New lines around his eyes, a slight thickening at his waist, a forced quality to his smile that I once would have moved mountains to appease. "You look great," he finally managed. "Really great." "Thank you. I've been meaning to call," he continued, shifting his weight. "Just to check in, see how you're doing. As you can see, I'm doing well." I gestured to Rachel. "You remember Rachel from school?" He nodded distractedly, barely acknowledging her. "Maybe we could get coffee sometime? Talk about things." Before I could respond, my phone rang, my lawyer's ringtone. "Excuse me, I need to take this," I said, grateful for the interruption. As I stepped away to answer, I heard Rachel's cool voice. "She's moved on, Michael. You should too." The call was brief, Patricia confirming our next meeting. When I returned to the table, Michael had gone back to Amanda, whose rigid posture screamed discomfort. We finished our meal without further interaction, though I felt Michael's gaze repeatedly throughout the evening. The text came later that night. "You really do look amazing, Jess. I've missed you. Things with Amanda aren't what I thought. Can we talk?" I stared at the message, emotions churning. A year ago, these words would have been everything I wanted to hear. Now they struck me as pathetic, even predatory, attempting to reclaim ownership of my transformation, to take credit for the strength I'd found in his absence. More messages followed over the next weeks. At first, I ignored them completely. When they persisted, I responded with brief, neutral replies. "I'm not interested in meeting," or "please communicate through our lawyers." From mutual acquaintances, I learned that Michael and Amanda's relationship was indeed struggling. She'd discovered text messages to yet another colleague, history repeating itself with painful predictability. I felt an unexpected flash of sympathy for her, wondering if she too would emerge stronger from Michael's betrayal. As the divorce neared finalization, I found myself reflecting on my journey, not just the physical transformation that had so visibly shocked Michael, but the deeper changes within. I no longer defined my worth through someone else's eyes. I no longer apologized for the space I occupied in the world. The weight I'd truly lost wasn't measured in pounds, but in the burden of shame I'd carried for so long. One evening, sorting through old papers, I found the Valentine's card that had once reduced me to tears, whose beauty, inside and out, takes my breath away. I reread it, expecting pain, but found only a wistful recognition of how desperately I'd once needed that validation. Now it seemed like a message from another lifetime, addressed to a woman I'd barely remembered being. I placed the card in a box of items destined for storage, not discarded, but no longer central to my present. As I closed the lid, I realized I was ready for the final confrontation, the one I'd been preparing for all along. Not out of vengeance, but for closure. To face Michael not as the broken woman he'd left behind, but as the whole person I'd become in spite of him. After weeks of Michael's persistent messages, I finally agreed to meet him. Not from loneliness or lingering attachment, but because something in me needed this final chapter to truly close the book on our relationship. Just dinner, I texted back. A public place. Nothing more. He suggested Oriole, an upscale restaurant downtown that I'd once longed to try. During our marriage, Michael had dismissed it as too expensive for what it is, though I now knew he'd taken Amanda there multiple times, according to the credit card statements uncovered during divorce proceedings. The irony wasn't lost on me. I prepared methodically for the evening, approaching it almost like a military operation. I called Dr. Wilson for a brief session to strengthen my emotional boundaries. I asked Rachel to be on standby, ready for a rescue call if needed. I even arranged with Patricia to have a document courier available if the opportunity arose. The dress I chose was new, a deep emerald that highlighted the red undertones in my hair and fitted perfectly to my new body. Not overtly sexy, but confident, polished, expensive-looking. Professional makeup, subtle jewelry, and the final touch, the delicate perfume Michael had always claimed gave him headaches, though I'd later discovered bottles of it among Amanda's things. I arrived at Oriole exactly on time, refusing to fall into my old pattern of showing up early to accommodate Michael's perpetual lateness. The maitre d' led me to our table, the best in the house, with a view of both the restaurant's elegant interior and the city lights beyond the windows. Michael had clearly pulled strings to impress. He stood when I approached, his eyes widening appreciatively as they traveled the length of my body. "Jessica," he breathed. "You look incredible." "Thank you," I replied simply, taking my seat as the waiter held my chair. Michael had aged in the year since we'd properly spoken. Designer clothes and expensive haircuts couldn't hide the new lines around his eyes, the slight bloating that spoke of too many business dinners with too much alcohol. Still handsome, yes, but the golden aura that had once surrounded him in my perception had faded. "I ordered champagne," he said, gesturing to the ice bucket beside our table. "To celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "Seeing you again. Your amazing transformation." He leaned forward conspiratorially. "You must have lost what, 40 pounds? 50? You look like the girl I fell in love with in college." I accepted a glass of champagne but didn't touch it. "I didn't come here to discuss my weight, Michael." "Of course not," he backpedaled smoothly. "I just meant, you look happy. Healthy." "I am," I acknowledged. Probably for the first time in years. A flicker of discomfort crossed his face before he masked it with his salesman's smile. "I'm glad. That's all I ever wanted for you, you know." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing, letting the lie hang awkwardly between us. The waiter's arrival to take our orders provided a welcome interruption. Michael ordered for both of us without consultation, a habit I'd once found charming but now recognized as controlling. "Actually," I interjected, "I'll have the seared scallops, please. And a side of the roasted vegetables." Michael looked momentarily thrown by my assertion, but recovered quickly. Once the waiter departed, he reached across the table for my hand. I withdrew it smoothly, reaching for my water glass instead. "I've missed you, Jess," he said softly. "Things haven't been the same without you." "I imagine not," I replied evenly. "How is Amanda?" His expression soured slightly. "That's complicated. We're taking some space right now." "Space," I repeated. Interesting term for it. What's that supposed to mean? "Just that space sounds better than, she caught you cheating just like I did," I said mildly. Michael's face flushed. "You've been checking up on me? Chicago's corporate world is smaller than you think. People talk." I sipped my water. "But that's not why I agreed to this dinner." "Why did you?" He looked genuinely curious. "Closure," I said simply. "And to return something that belongs to you." "What's that?" "Power," I said. "For years, I gave you power over my self-worth, my happiness, my perception of my own body. I'm returning it to you. I don't need it anymore." Michael shifted uncomfortably. "You're talking like I was some kind of monster. We had good years together, Jess. We could have them again. Are you suggesting we reconcile?" I asked, genuinely surprised despite having anticipated this angle. Why not? His voice took on the persuasive tone he used for difficult clients. You've obviously worked hard to fix what was wrong. I've learned some hard lessons too. We could start fresh. The audacity nearly took my breath away. Fix what was wrong, I repeated slowly. You mean my body? Well, it was an issue for us, he said defensively. You can't deny that. But now you've fixed yourself and… I didn't fix myself, Michael, I interrupted, my voice firm but controlled. I healed myself. From you. Our food arrived, creating another pause in the increasingly tense conversation. I ate methodically, determined not to let his presence ruin a perfectly good meal I was paying for in more ways than one. Michael pushed his food around his plate, his appetite apparently diminished by the direction of our discussion. What about Amanda? I asked after a few minutes of silence. Are you still together? He sighed dramatically. Technically, yes, but like I said, it's complicated. She's not you, Jess. In what way? She's too focused on her career. Too demanding. He trailed off. Too unwilling to make herself small so you can feel big? I suggested. Michael's expression hardened. That's unfair. Is it? I set down my fork. You left me because I was fat, Michael. Those were your words. You blamed me for your cheating, your cruelty, your complete disregard for our vows. And now that I've lost weight, you think you can waltz back into my life like nothing happened. People make mistakes, he insisted. I never stopped loving you. I just couldn't handle what our marriage had become. What you couldn't handle was a wife who didn't fit your image requirements, I corrected. A wife whose body reflected the stress and unhappiness caused by your constant criticism and infidelity. Michael leaned forward, lowering his voice. Look, I know I hurt you. I know I messed up. But I'm sitting here humbling myself, asking for another chance. Doesn't that count for something? I studied him carefully, seeing for the first time how truly small he was, not physically, but morally, emotionally. The man I had once placed on a pedestal was revealed in harsh light as insecure, shallow, incapable of true partnership. Actually, I said, there is something else I wanted to discuss with you. Hope flickered in his eyes. Anything. I glanced at my watch and then toward the restaurant entrance. Right on cue, a man in a tailored suit entered, scanning the room until he spotted our table. I raised my hand slightly, and he approached. Jessica Miller, he confirmed. Yes, that's me. I have the documents you requested. He placed a leather portfolio on the table. Michael looked between us, confusion evident. What's this? Who is he? This is James Cooper, I explained calmly. My financial investigator. James nodded politely to Michael before turning back to me. Everything's in order. Just need your signature on the receipt. I signed quickly, thanked him, and he departed as efficiently as he had arrived. Michael stared at the portfolio as if it might explode. Financial investigator? He finally managed. Yes, I said, opening the folder. You see, while I was healing from our marriage, I had a lot of time to think. And one of the things I thought about was your sudden promotion 3 years ago. The one that came with the significant raise and bonus structure that you insisted on keeping separate from our joint accounts. Michael's face had gone pale. That was perfectly legal. My lawyer reviewed everything. Your lawyer, I agreed. The one who conveniently failed to disclose those accounts during our initial divorce filings. I slid several documents across the table. These are copies of transfers from your company's client accounts to a shell corporation that just happens to share an address with your brother's investment firm. Transfers that coincide perfectly with your performance bonuses. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, though his eyes darted nervously over the papers. Where did you get these? Let's just say that when Amanda realized you were cheating on her too, she became surprisingly helpful. Especially when she learned she might be implicated in financial impropriety if she didn't cooperate. I could almost see the calculations running behind Michael's eyes, weighing denials against damage control, aggression against appeasement. What do you want? He finally asked, voice low and tense. "A fair divorce settlement," I replied simply. "The one you've been fighting for a year. The house, half of all assets including those you've hidden, and a reasonable alimony term reflecting the 8 years I supported your career while you betrayed our marriage. Or what? You'll report me." He attempted a dismissive laugh that fell flat. "It would be your word against mine. It would be these documents, Amanda's testimony, and an anonymous tip to both the SEC and your company's compliance department." I closed the portfolio calmly. "I don't want to do that, Michael. Despite everything, I don't wish to see you in prison. But I will if you continue to fight me on what's fair." Michael sat back in his chair, defeat slowly settling over his features. For the first time since I'd known him, he appeared truly speechless. I signaled for the check, paid it despite his weak protest, and gathered my things. Standing to leave, I looked down at the man I had once built my world around. "The revised settlement agreement is in the portfolio," I said. "Patricia will expect your lawyer's call by noon tomorrow. This time, I suggest you sign." I walked out of Oriole with straight shoulders and steady steps, feeling neither triumph nor anger, just a profound relief, as if I'd set down a burden I'd carried so long I'd forgotten the feeling of moving without it. 6 months later, my new life had taken shape. The divorce was finalized, with Michael accepting the terms laid out that night. I sold our suburban house, using my portion of the proceeds to purchase a bright apartment downtown with a view of the lake. My promotion to lead teacher brought new challenges and satisfactions, along with the financial independence I'd once thought impossible. The physical transformation that had so shocked Michael had stabilized into a healthy, sustainable lifestyle. I no longer exercised to punish my body or restricted food to control it. Instead, I moved because it brought me joy and nourished myself because I deserved care. Some days were still hard. Some mornings I still criticized my reflection, but those moments grew fewer as self-compassion gradually replaced the harsh inner voice that had echoed Michael's criticisms for so long. My volunteer work with a women's shelter began almost accidentally after sharing my story at a fundraiser Rachel organized. Something about seeing the recognition in other women's eyes, women still trapped in the cycle of emotional abuse I had escaped, awakened a calling I hadn't known was there. Twice monthly, I facilitated a support group similar to the one that had helped save me, creating space for women to recognize their worth beyond relationships that diminish them. Romance remained on the horizon, not a current reality. There had been dates. A history professor Rachel introduced me to, a fellow hiking club member who shared my love of obscure documentaries, but I was in no rush. For the first time in my adult life, I was learning who Jessica was outside the context of a relationship, and that discovery felt too precious to dilute. On the anniversary of my final dinner with Michael, I treated myself to a solo meal at Oriole. The same table, the same emerald dress, but a different woman entirely filling it. As I savored each bite of perfectly seared scallops, I reflected on the journey of the past 2 years, from devastation to reconstruction to flourishing. The greatest revenge against Michael hadn't been the financial settlement or even the sweet justice of revealing his deception. It had been rebuilding a life so full and authentic that his absence became not a wound but a foundation, the painful but necessary catalyst for finding myself. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, "Thinking of you tonight. Proud of who you've become. Call if you need anything." I smiled, typing back, "I'm good. Really good. Having dinner with my favorite person, me." And for the first time, that wasn't a brave facade or a motivational mantra. It was simply, wonderfully true. What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild yourself after someone tried to break you? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from our deepest wounds. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you strength and healing on yours.